Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining this week's panel conversation. I'm really happy that you're going to spend a little bit of time listening to a couple of leaders in law enforcement. We've been doing these panel conversations for about a year now. And the intent of these conversations is really just to share ideas around engagement, what local communities are finding successful in connecting with residents, particularly during these just really kind of weird times that we're all living through. Getting the input from leaders in law enforcement. And today we have two police chiefs that are going to be sharing some of the things that they're doing. It just really becomes an important message to be delivering to folks that are either in local government or people that are just interested in what's going on within the law enforcement world. My name is Matt Fulton. I'm the Vice President for National Engagement for a company called Polco. We work with communities around engagement, helping to build stronger engagement using an online civic engagement platform, as well as help communities with performance. But the intent of these conversations is really more about sharing ideas and perspectives of what communities are finding successful in their own engagement efforts. The day goes pretty smooth. I'll do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we'll queue up the questions. I'm going to be asking 3 questions of each of the gentlemen that are with us today. And depending on time availability, when we get done with the questions, we'll provide an opportunity to have a little bit more of a conversation if there's any topics that we want to explore a little bit further. So with that, let me just go ahead and start introducing our panelists. Aaron Nelson is the Chief of Police for the city of Kittitas, Washington. He's actually a second-generation law enforcement officer, but he's got an interesting career path because he was in the transportation world and owned a transportation company for over a decade prior to re-entering into the law enforcement world. He studied criminal justice at Eastern Gateway Community College, as well as organizational management at Northwest University. He's got an innovative look on scheduling and officer health and wellness, and he maintains a staff with high morale and performance, and focuses a lot on community outreach and engagement, which is great to have him here to participate in this conversation. Aaron, thank you for joining the conversation. And I would love it if you would just add a little bit of color to your background.
Well, thanks for having me. Like I said, I started in transportation. My dad was a police officer, and he medically retired and worked for Goodyear for a long time. So I followed into the transportation side of things, had a trucking and towing company for about a decade, had a personal family issue with one of my close family members that had an interaction with law enforcement didn't go how I thought it should go, and so I decided to sell my company and get into law enforcement and try to make a difference. And I keep that with me and carry it with me in everything that I do, and I carry it to my guys, and because of that, we have an amazing relationship with our community.
That's great. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what you're doing to create those connections. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Let me introduce everyone to Chris Twitchell. Chris is the Chief of Police in Buffalo, Missouri, and brings over 26 years of law enforcement experience. He's a graduate of Lincoln University. He's got a master's in criminal justice sociology. One of the interesting things about Chris is that he's also a law enforcement instructor and has been for almost the last 2 decades. Working at Columbia College and Drury University. Chris, thank you for being part of the conversation, and would really appreciate you adding a little bit more to your background.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been a law enforcement officer for about 26 years. I was a rodeo cowboy before I got into law enforcement. So I've been in law enforcement since I've been almost 21 years old. I'm an adjunct professor over at Drury University and over at Columbia College. I teach sociology. I teach a lot of classes on social justice and other things. But yeah, I really enjoy community approaches to law enforcement. I think it's really important we have their support when we're doing things, and that's kind of how I've really pigeonholed my leadership career around.
Well, that's great. Just kind of given both of you guys, your focus on connecting with your residents and in the outreach kind of arena, just really appreciate both of you spending time today with us. So with that, let's kind of kick into the topic. The topic of the conversation today is putting police needs and expectations into a community context. And I was a city manager for over 30 years. And it just struck me that everything that a city does in one way or another has an impact on public safety. It's such an important part, an important responsibility that impacts every aspect of community life. And as you kind of think about why people invest in where they live, it really is so that they can enjoy the life that they expect and they want, and it's going to be in a safe environment. But particularly with your responsibilities and your roles in law enforcement, the expectations are just so exceedingly high. So many of us take for granted most of the work that law enforcement does until you get into a crisis. And then if there's a mistake made during the course of that challenge or that crisis, the impacts on a community can be simply generational. We see that happening all over the place. And so the responsibilities that you have in creating those relationships, and so the resiliency factor is built up so that people know the work that you're doing and respect and trust the work that you're responsible for. It just becomes such a critical thing. And then you lay on top of that things like the pandemic, the civil unrest that we've been experiencing, the political divisiveness that exists around the country. It just elevates the importance of doing engagement in a meaningful way so that you've got those connections in place with the community. One of the things that we do is we have a community survey that's designed to get resident sentiment around local law enforcement services. And we did 2 national administrations in 2018 and 2020, essentially pre and post George Floyd, just to kind of measure the shift in resident sentiment around law enforcement. And the chart that I'm showing you here identifies resident priorities that were identified during these 2 national administrations. And while many of them are pretty self-explanatory, the 2 that I want to point out that actually increased between 2018 and 2020 relate to increasing connections with the community and increasing resident accessibility to police. In other words, I think one of the issues, one of the shifts that has happened over the last couple of years is a stronger desire on the part of residents to be connected with their local law enforcement agencies. And so this whole topic of engagement becomes a really important conversation to be having. And that's one of the reasons why these conversations are so important to have. So there's 3 questions that we want to explore with each of you. One is, what role should the community play in guiding and influencing the delivery of services in the police world? What strategies do you use for managing community expectations? Once you understand what the expectations are, then how do you manage them? Because most people want to have things accomplished overnight. And then finally, we want to learn a little bit more about the tools and methods that you're finding successful with connecting with residents, especially if there's any creative thing that you are doing that you're proud of that you'd love to share with other local law enforcement leadership. So with that, what I love to do is to kick into the first question. And Chief Nelson, I'd like to start with you on this one. Chief, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding and influencing the delivery of police services in Kittitas?
Sir Robert Peel said it best: the police are the public and the public are the police. We have to make the community have buy-in, and realistically, they should guide essentially everything that we do. Because without their consent, we can't operate. We can't do our jobs. We run into these situations that you see in these large urban cities where you have officers that literally can't go into neighborhoods. And that can't happen, especially in small towns like myself and Chief Twitchell have areas that my victim today will be my witness tomorrow. My witness might be my suspect next week. So, we have to make sure that we treat everyone with respect and their opinions are heard, and we make an effort to really explore every option possible for that community engagement. We do a lot of things that reach out to the community and ask for opinions. A lot of time that I guess could be construed as being wasted in a really busy agency, but I think it pays dividends for us, and it's an approach I think should be explored more in bigger agencies.
Chief, did you, we'll explore kind of the details of how you engage with your residents, but during the last couple of years, did you experience any shift in the number or the level of participation, the level of engagement that residents played in the community?
Certainly. Over the last couple of years with, the pandemic and with the civil unrest, we have found it's been a really interesting shift for us because we're a small conservative town in a very liberal state. And what has happened is people want to be more involved with their city and law enforcement. We found that people here are particularly mistrusting of their government as a whole, but very trusting of their law enforcement, which has been really interesting. And we end up basically being the face of the city, being the most visible part of the government. And because of our ability to get out there and speak with people, it's helped bring that trust back to our city as a whole.
Yeah, okay. That's really very interesting. I'm going to be really interested in exploring that a little bit further. Chief Twitchell, can you talk about the role that the community plays in guiding and influencing police services in Buffalo?
Well, Chief Nelson kind of echoed what I would say when it comes to, we were a small conservative group of residents down here in the Midwest, a lot of farmers, a lot of rural area. And, our community, we're lucky being a small municipality that our community plays a huge role in what direction we go. Because, it's hard for me coming in and telling my citizens what they need. I have to hear from them what they expect of their police department. And I'll echo what Chief Nelson said, we have a place where a lot of people have a mistrust of government. And, it seems like it's a growing trend right now that nobody trusts the federal government. Nobody trusts any of the governments. And we tend to be the people that are more of their connection with that they can come to and talk to. Since, we're very close to where Ferguson happened. And, that was a huge pivotal moment in law enforcement. It was kind of a gut check more than anything of, are we doing things the right way? And if we're not doing things the right way, how can we do better? So the community speaks. Either you listen to what the community has to say, or they speak really loud and it becomes a negative communication. So I think it's really important that we allow the community options to come talk to us and have that buy-in, like he said, of what direction they want their police department to
go. Chris, did you sense, or do you sense that participation levels or engagement levels increased or decreased during the last couple of years? You're kind of coming from the unique perspective of being close to Ferguson, and so that probably has an impact on how much attention people are paying to local government and law enforcement. But any sense around that?
Well, I think so. I think people are more engaged because they're more interested in the transparency aspect of what's going on in their government. Before, it was, well, it doesn't affect me, I don't care. And we still have a lot of that. People don't care because it doesn't affect them, but there are groups of people that it does affect. So, I think that it is happening. And, you also have social media that is a huge platform, just like LinkedIn and just like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And people are able to spread negativity, not just positivity anymore. And I think that has a huge effect on what we do now, because people have become real reactive instead of proactive.
Yeah, no, I agree that outside influence just has huge impacts on the way people are perceiving not only law enforcement, just general services in general. And
Right.
So you're right. Yeah, so you got kind of your hands full with dealing with those perceptions rather than the reality.
Well, and just like Chief Nelson was talking about, we come from different areas, but we're very similar. Especially in how we do things. We have a lot of people from the East and West Coast coming to the Midwest from urban plight. They're trying away from the things they don't like in their areas, and they're coming down here, and it's mixing and intermingling with different groups of people down here too. So, we have a lot of different personalities coming to light now. And, our officers have to deal with that as well. They have to understand that people do have different backgrounds, and, multiculturalism is a huge thing now. We have to respect where people come from and where they're going and what they bring to the table, instead of just being quote unquote colorblind to what goes on in life.
Yeah, that is so true. And one of the nice things about these conversations is you can have different jurisdictions in different parts of the country in different sizes. It doesn't really matter. The whole idea around engagement and the importance of connecting with your residents around things that you all believe in is all pretty universal. And so it really has been helpful to have these conversations. Chief Twitchell, let me stick with you for the second question. And I'd love for you to talk about, once you understand what resident needs are and priorities are, it's another thing to manage those expectations. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about managing resident expectations in Buffalo?
Well, one thing I learned a long time ago is you just can't sit in your office. And I'm lucky enough to be from a small department where I can go out and work with my men and women out there and engage in the community. And I think a lot of leaders make the mistake that they surround themselves by people that agree with what they have to say. And so all you have is a bunch of people that are yes people that agree with everything you're saying. And you think, oh, well, this is where everybody wants to go with this because everybody's telling me. But the problem is when you surround yourself by that type of persons that are engaging in the same behavior and beliefs that you have, it kind of, you typically go for that confirmation bias. You confirm everything you're having is okay because everybody's telling you that, right? You miss a really good opportunity to go out in the community and get a different aspect on it. So one of the biggest strategies I try to use is roundtables with my officers to find out, what is your thoughts on things of how we're going to the community, and then being involved in a lot of community functions, Rotary clubs and businesses and different things in our community to find out, to get straight from the horse's mouth what my community is liking or disliking about what we're doing. And then when I take that, I try to develop a strategic plan constantly because, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of departments that don't use strategic plans. They don't make a plan. It's we're putting out a fire every single day and we're not planning for the future. So, by developing that strategic plan of where you want to go with your programs, and if you don't make those milestones, well, how do you know you're being successful? I think just developing a plan is the biggest thing that I use.
Is your strategic planning work, is it mostly a departmental project, or is it something that is done by the entire city?
Well, so we're a little decentralized in my department because we are a small municipality. We have a growing community. We are north of a very large metropolitan area of Springfield, Missouri. So we're starting to grow. So it's causing our city government to start making strategic plans. So ours align with theirs, but we have our own here because I am a department head. I do manage my police department and I am the sole person managing it. So I don't have any commissioners or anybody that manage my department for me. It's probably a lot like Chief Nelson. We kind of are in charge of our budget. We're in charge of everything that we have to do. And it's our successes and our failures, unfortunately. But the city's very supportive of our strategic plan and a part of it.
Yeah. Do you kind of go through that strategic planning effort on an annual basis?
Yeah, we try to go annual and, biannual reviews to make sure that we're hitting the milestones that we've set forth.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. I think I agree with you. That's a really meaningful tool for helping you to make sure that in 5 years, you're getting to where you actually want to get to and,
right.
And figuring out the path to get there. So yeah, congratulations on that. Chief Nelson, can you talk about the strategies that you're using in Kittitas to help manage resident expectations?
Kittitas.
Kittitas. Okay, thanks. I'll get it by the end of the panel
By
conversation.
the end of the panel, yeah. Like Chief Twitchell, we do a lot of community outreach with organizations and groups to get the input directly from the citizens. Because, you know, when you go to the council meetings or when you just listen to citizen complaints, you get a very skewed cross section of the community. You have to outreach and get the information yourself. And if you're waiting for it to come to you, you only listen to the squeaky wheel. And then you end up focusing your efforts on a very small portion of the community. We've found that by doing like our national night out events, being really involved in the school, we utilize social media very heavily. We try to make our Facebook posts pretty funny, and our following is about 5 times the size of the population of our city. So, you know, I think we do pretty good there. It's really important that you reach the people that won't ever complain. That's what I have found is the most important thing to managing those community expectations. Is you have to find out what the expectations really are, and not just, you know, the 8 people that show up to the council meeting and complain. So once we do that, once we have made that connection, it's all about those little conversations. It's sitting in the coffee shop and, you know, hey, how do you think things are going? Just, I mean, I'm notorious for ambushing people. Just see you on the street, hey, can I steal you for a second? How do you think things are going? Have you dealt with any of my cops lately? How are they? How was your interaction? We have body cameras, and one of our policies that I wrote was body cameras. We cannot go on fishing expeditions through video to look for policy violations and things. But one of the things that we do is that we use those videos. I sit down with the officers and talk to them about, hey, here's how this interaction went. Here's maybe what you could have done differently. And that's really paid dividends with our interactions with the community at large. Because ultimately, myself and Chief Twitchell, we are the head of the organization, but we have things to do like writing grants and, you know, strategic planning. And if you could see my desk right now, it's atrocious. But if we create our officers as ambassadors to the community and make sure that they have the same mindset and goals and plans that we do, and make them care about the community expectations, they manage it for us.
You have a pretty strong integration with your officers and the community. Do you have them assigned to different areas or different service clubs or different ways of interacting in the community?
We're small enough that we can't do that. We don't have zones or precincts. It's just you know, we're patrolling the city. But my guys, because we treat them really well, we do some really innovative officer health and wellness stuff here. In fact, I think we're the only ones in the country doing a couple of the things that we do. And it's really created, when I started in law enforcement, and I'm sure Chief Twitchell can say the same thing, you always heard from admin, you know, we're family, we take care of each other. And there was no teeth to that statement. And one of the things that I've really tried to do is make sure that there's teeth to that statement when I say it. And because of that, my guys go out there and they represent my agency and our city in a way that makes me proud every day. And that is what manages that community expectation and keeps the community having a positive outlook of the agency. Because all it takes is one cop and one bad interaction to ruin that.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. Can you just share with me really quickly? I love the notion of focusing on the health and safety of your officers, and I just would love for you to share a little bit about what that really means. What are the creative ways that other departments might be able to benefit from in the health and wellness area, since that's such a critical thing right now?
Well, the small things that we've done is focusing on equipment and the comfort. I mean, just stupid things like this shirt is a stretchy 32-degree polo shirt. It's not a traditional uniform, but it's what I give my guys. They're comfortable when they go to work. They know that they have top-notch equipment. You know, I have chosen to invest in making sure that they have what they need to be comfortable and feel safe. They're not running around with a taser that might or might not work. They're not running around with a Gen 2 block. They have what they need to be successful, and that's the first step in that We have a gym here. We converted one of our bays in our old fire station. We converted to a fire authority, so it was all centralized. So our city fire department ceased to exist. So we have a fire station, essentially not unused space. We converted one of the bays there to a gym. Went and bought, workout equipment. Me and the guys pooled our money and bought really nice equipment for up there. I make sure that the guys have time to work out on duty. We really focus on family as far as you remember when the guys' anniversaries are, make sure they have it off. Remember when their kids' birthdays are, make sure that they have that time. Make sure that, if there's a big basketball game coming up and their kid's going to play in it, they've got 2 hours to take off. And if I got to cover that, I'll cover it. The biggest thing that we've done is we converted 3 months ago to a fire schedule. So we're working 24-hour shifts. And that's been the biggest kicker. That's been the thing that has paid the biggest dividends. Since we did that, we've cut over a minute off our response time. Our officers have not only handled all of our calls, but they're stepping up and handling calls out in the surrounding county area. They're coming to work happy. Our community engagement is way off the charts. Every time I talk to somebody, all they can talk about is how happy our officers are, how well they were treated. Because when the guys feel valued, they have time at home, they're not stuck working a graveyard shift for the first 10 years of their career, they treat our people better because they're happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting. So did you say you're doing 24-hour shifts?
Yes, sir.
That is unique.
We took over the bunk room at the fire station, and
Yep.
they have an on-call phone. Their cars parked inside during their on-call hours, plugged in, ready to go, so their MDC isn't shut off. And the big worry with the city was that by doing that, we would increase our response time. And I just got done doing our data analysis, and we actually cut a little over a minute off of our average response time.
Wow, congratulations. That's really something. Yeah, very cool. Hey, Chief Nelson, let me stay with you for the third and final question. You talked about the engagement levels in your community. I'd love to learn a little bit about what tools and techniques that you're finding successful for engaging that other local government leaders might be interested in learning about. Anything you can share with us?
Again, social media has been huge for us. I can't overstate the importance of being relatable. There's a huge section of our society that looks at law enforcement, looks at police officers as not human, not somebody they can talk to, not somebody they can interact with. And when you get on the city Facebook page and you see officers, cracking jokes about each other, or bringing their puppy to work and spilling whipped cream all over themselves, or just generally having a sense of humor, it makes people comfortable. Since we started our social media 2 years ago, it's been night and day. And before that, it was the traditional, oh, it's the cops, we don't want to talk to the cops. And now people actually call and report crime, and people interact with us. People come down just to ask our opinion. Hey, I'm having this dispute with my neighbor. I don't want to call 911. What do you think I should do? And we take the time to sit down with people, and once you develop that reputation that you're willing to spend the time, it snowballs, and you continue to expand on that. But the social media is really the biggest part of that, and being responsive on social media, not just getting online and posting, hey, it's going to snow today, drive safe. Get on there, make comments, talk to people, engage. Obviously, you have to be careful who you engage with and how you engage, because it's all public disclosure. But by and large, most of the people that are going to engage on there want to interact with law enforcement. They just don't know how.
Yeah. Do you? I love the relatable aspect of how you're using social media, because I think that's such an important part of just connecting with your residents. You had also mentioned about the use of your data, kind of a data analysis. Can you share a little bit about how you're using data for helping to inform decisions around either around engagement or around performance?
Well, I'm a bit of a nerd. I love my Excel spreadsheets, and we use Spillman, which is great because it allows us to run reports and download data sets. So that's been great. Really, data doesn't lie. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't have the squeaky wheel. It doesn't have somebody showing up to complain. Data is just data. So, if you can interpret it without having a already formed opinion, you can really make an impact on the effectiveness of your police services. We just ran a data analysis, like I said, and looked at our response times. And one of the things that jumped out to me on those response times was there were certain types of calls that we were letting pend, even though we weren't super busy. And so we sat down and had an employee meeting and talked to the guys about it and said, hey, listen, I understand this isn't a priority call. It's not, somebody kicking in a door or a burglary, but they shouldn't have to wait half an hour. So let's make sure that we're not making these people sit. And so we haven't had any complaints. We haven't had anybody, write angry letter to the mayor. We were able to catch this issue before it became a real issue. And that's the real important thing about data is you're going to catch things before it's a fire. Like Chief Twitchell said, a lot of agencies are putting out fires every day. And if you really look at and interpret your data and pay attention to trends and how things are going, you can address things when they start to smolder before they become a fire.
Yeah, that is so true. I'm just capturing that thought. Yeah, congratulations. That really resonates with me. The use of data to help kind of be proactive and get ahead of the situation before it creates that fire. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Chief Twitchell, I'd love to have you share with us some of the tools and techniques and methods that you're finding successful for helping you to understand where your residents' priorities are, as well as for how you go about tracking your performance.
Well, we do the same that Chief Nelson's talking about data driven. You got to look at what kind of calls you have and what kind of responses you have and getting across to your officers that even the smallest of calls still a response and it still needs to be treated the same. Social media, he hit it right on the head. Social media is so important because, I've always been a firm believer that if you don't get the story out, somebody else will, and they'll tell it the way they want to tell it. So you might as well get the information out now and get it out correctly. That way there's no one that thinks that, number one, you're trying to hide something, and number two, that you're trying to keep something from your community. So, get it out there before, get ahead of the story, get ahead of things that's brewing in your community so people know. Social media, like you said, being a little funny, just showing people that you're human. And people want to see a human aspect, especially this generation. They're looking more for human interaction and contact. And, we've had this just the facts, ma'am, with the sunglasses and, uniforms. I mean, we do the same thing. We've gone to a relaxed uniform to really kind of help the health and wellness of our officers when it comes to keeping weight off their back and stuff, using outside carriers. Letting officers work out on duty, a little bit of maintenance time. And I do the same thing. I bring their spouses in or anybody involved in their family and say, hey, this person better than I do. When this person starts dipping, I need to know about it, so I can use some early warning signs because when that person explodes, they explode on the community, and we don't need that to happen. We need to make sure we catch it here first. So social media, community interaction with family is important. Community programs are pretty important too. We do a shop with a cop here. We actually do shop with a hero because we involve the firemen and we involved everybody because we have a small community and sometimes we have a lot of kids. So I have found coffee with the chief works phenomenal. Advertising that you're going to be in a spot and you're going to be available to the community. I have an open door policy in my police department. I have it with my guys. I have it with my community. Anybody can come in off the street and come talk to me if they want. And I know that's advantageous for us. It doesn't always happen in the big cities, but that's something that's wonderful about us and our communities. Same thing with Chief Nelson's probably is we have an opportunity to address issues. And we would be foolish not to take those opportunities to be better and to address problems in these small communities like that. The National Nights Out, having a Citizens Academy where kids learn what law enforcement goes through, and kind of create that community connection with kids as they're starting out. So, getting that buy-in is really important, and selling your brand to the community seems to be a really good tool that we use, because when they want to buy your product, they're more willing to come buy it, if you sell it right. Community surveys, just putting paper out there and letting people with SurveyMonkey or different places come and tell you what they are most concerned about. Because, if we have a large concentration of drug investigations and we're not addressing the other things like nuisances or traffic infractions or stuff, just finding out the community what their vibe is of what that's most important to them is probably one of the biggest tools and strategies that I found important.
Chris, you had mentioned earlier about getting engaged with kind of local groups like Rotary and other civic groups. Do you look to your officers to get involved in those, or what is kind of your strategy? And then secondly, if you could talk a little bit about, I totally agree with you on finding a way to tell your own story, because that's such an important aspect of branding your community in a way that gets the right information out there. But in a small department, how do you go about doing that? Do you have somebody that you assign that responsibility? If you could talk about those two items, that would be great.
So that's a big thing. There's two things cops don't like. Number one, we don't like change. And number two, we don't like the way things are, right? So unfortunately, you have to force law enforcement officers, because we're creatures of habit, into different habits, and force them away from bad habits. One of the biggest habits I see with cops is they want to come to work and they want to go home. They don't want to get involved in civic organizations or do a lot of stuff because they want to leave that at work. And sometimes it's hard to tell your officers, hey, I want you to go do stuff outside of work and get involved in stuff outside of work to be a part of your community, because you're asking a little bit more of them. But what I try to do is get my people involved in civic organizations so they have something besides law enforcement to focus on. It makes them a better, well-rounded officer, and it gives them a community focus, gives them a connection with their community. So, they're hearing people talk, like ball games or coaching soccer, or, just being a part of the community. And I do the same thing. I try to lead by example with kind of some of that stuff. Is I'm involved in a lot of stuff in my community. Like Chief Nelson was talking about, we're a small department. Some of my people need off because they have kids. So I'll come in and work, and I know a lot of bigger departments don't get to do that, but we do. And we would be foolish not to take advantage of stuff like that. And what was the other question you'd asked me about?
Well, I was just kind of curious about who do you have assigned to help you with your social media, your outbound messaging?
I have found, we have reserve officers here, auxiliary officers, that don't do this full time. They come in and help out. They're certified police officers. I have some of my auxiliary officers that just keep my Facebook page hot, and one of them, his name's Brandon. He's the school principal over here, and he's one of my reserve officers, right? But he keeps my Facebook page hopping all the time with, and if there's something I want to put out, I'll call Brandon, say, hey, Brandon, go look into this and put something out on this, would you? Or I'll put something out, or having all my officers have access to our page. So if they catch a picture of something going on in the community, or they see a hazard in the community that people need to know about, like a traffic hazard or an event, that they're able to jump on real quick and post something. Of course, you got to monitor what people put, but just having people assigned to that is really important. So it just doesn't always fall on your shoulders, because we have a lot to do, right? If I can't put 100% into something, I'm only going to be putting 5% here and here and here and here. I would like somebody else to put 25% into it.
So smart using your auxiliary reserve folks to help get some of that stuff done. Absolutely, it's a great way. And I'm glad you shared that, because I think a lot of people will really benefit from just knowing how you're doing it, that maybe they haven't thought about it that way. So I appreciate that a lot. Guys, this has been great. This is Aaron, I know we're going to lose you in just a couple of minutes. We got maybe a minute or two of just any questions or follow-up topics or issues that you want to make sure that you're talking about, or questions for each other. If not, let's just go ahead and kind of wrap this thing up. Really good conversation around the ways that you're engaging as small jurisdictions. You know, the engagement need is so critical and just as important in a small jurisdiction as the larger jurisdiction. But you've got the added value of being accessible, being available, and truly interacting and engaging with your community members. I love the open door policy approach and hearing about how you're just, you're presenting yourselves as residents of the community and really presenting that human side, yet also recognizing the value of the use of technology and social media for getting the message out in kind of this new world that we all live in. So really good stuff, really, really great conversations to have around the ways that you're engaging, and congratulations on all of the work that you're doing and the ways that you are engaging in your community. Great conversation. So let me kind of wrap up the conversation before we lose Aaron. I'll follow up with each of you to just make sure you got information for each other. So if you want to connect with each other on anything that came up, I do these conversations every week, and so I'm always open to getting ideas and names of people who are interested and maybe have some stuff that they can share around the topic of engagement. So if you know of anybody that's in your neighborhood that you think would benefit from being on a panel, by all means, let me know. I will connect with you probably over the next week just to kind of learn a little bit more about your experience. And I'd love to get any feedback that you have on how we can make these conversations better. I'm always looking for ways to improve on these conversations. I think they really have served the communities well, but always looking for ways to improve. The benefit for me is I get to meet two good guys every week. And so this week was no different. Thanks a lot for spending the last hour with us. And you'll probably start seeing the highlight segments being published on LinkedIn within the next week or so. When I start seeing them, I'll make sure you get them. But I look forward to getting your reaction to them. And we always want you to share them with your LinkedIn networks. Those folks who trust your opinions will benefit from seeing those highlight segments as well. So with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time you spent, and look forward to just staying in connection.